You are listening to The Manual with Mike Sheridan. The opinions expressed here are purely that of the individuals in question and can sometimes be of an adult nature.
Des Bishop, thanks so much for joining us. 2 days, we're recording this 2 days before your 40th birthday, Wikipedia tells me. Is Wikipedia right?
Yeah, November 12th.
How does it feel to be turning 40? Because I know your new act is kind of based around...
Well, you know, let me tell you a little secret about titles of stand-up comedy shows. Unless it's something like My China Show, which is clearly about a theme, most stand-up comedy titles are written well before the show is written. So you have to sort of keep it vague enough. So I called it Grey Matters, knowing that most likely I would probably talk a bit about turning 40 and, you know, going grey, that type of stuff. But actually, the new show is about whatever. It's just a straight stand-up show. But as far as myself and what I feel about turning 40, I don't know, man. I wasn't thinking much about it, except everyone kind of brings it up. It doesn't help when you've put it into your press release. I don't mean the press, I mean my friends. What are you doing for your 40th? You know, this big, like, I'm not a big, like, birthday party guy anyway. But I don't have that many thoughts about it. I mean, I don't have a 40-year-old's life, but I feel pretty 40 physically. I feel like I'm dealing with, like, 40-year-old issues. Other than the fact that I don't have any kids, I have a lot of, like, middle-aged stuff going on in my life. Like, you know, sick parents, house buying, house moving, just like all that type of stuff going on. So I feel pretty 40.
It's all grown up shit.
Yeah. So I'm fine. I'm actually fine with it, to be honest. Like, I'm glad to be 40 and be who I am.
Yeah.
I have some guys I go up with and I'm like, sucker, you are really a bad 40. I'm pretty content with my 40. But yeah, so I don't think about it too much.
And just because, you know, the Irish press, I don't think have copped on to what happens in the US, a lot of what happens in the US talk circus, where a comedian will be hyping something and will be going around doing Conan and doing all the shows. And it kind of segues slightly into bits. And, you know, like the Conan will go, okay, and he'll let Bill Burr or whoever run for maybe 5 or 6.
You don't think that's what happens on the Late Late?
You know, but that's what I'm saying. So, but on the Late Late,
that is exactly what happens.
No, but I'm saying,
Late Late.
but the press then jump on it like you're kind of deeply getting into your personal life. But really, it's kind of more of a bit, and it's still, you know, what's you, and the lines are kind of blurred there.
I think, to be honest, man. Okay, so like I was Instagramming over the weekend, like, about how 2 sort of setups to jokes became like, when I say headlines, like, we're talking about like entertainment.ie and also like breakingnews.ie. So they just took like a kind of a setup to a joke and made it seem like I was making like a big life statement. But I don't think it's because they don't get it. I think it's because they can do that, and that's fine. And who cares, you know? I mean, I was posting the pictures online because I thought it was like a fun thing to post. I wasn't particularly like, but it's like everything online. You post a thing and then it gets like taken out of context. Both their headline and what you post online, it doesn't matter. It's all just out there. It's all just a bit of crack, you know. It's all just a bit of like online banter, and that's absolutely fine. But I don't think that independent.ie and breakingnews.ie don't get what was happening. I just think they do get that they can do that, and that's fine, you know. So who cares, you know? I think most people know that that's what's happening on the Late Late. Ryan is saying like, so you're turning 40 and we have organized.
That's what a good host does. He lets a comedian be funny, or he lets the interesting person be interesting, and he's the passive one.
Yeah, that's what a good host does. Yeah. So anyway, you know, it's fine. Like it's different on the Late Late because, like, so Conan. Well, actually, here's the thing. Here's a bugbear that I have, and this is not a criticism of anyone who has a chat show in Ireland at the moment. But if you look at the chat shows now and the history of chat shows in Ireland, we have never had a comedian fronting them. Even the experiments haven't been comedians, which is very interesting, you know? So I don't know why Irish TV is so afraid of having comedians. But the thing about Conan and Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon and, you know, Jay Leno before them, like, all those guys were comedians first. They were known to be funny men, and therefore there's just an energy of, this is going to be a bit of crack, right? And you don't have that energy on Irish chat shows so much. This is going to be a bit of crack, you know, because even like Ray Darcy's just started, and it's like somebody from Laura Lynn House and then Al Porter. I mean, I'm not saying that was a particular show, but you know what I mean? Like, that's the way it goes,
It's
right?
a difficult balance to strike when you've got serious and
so
funny.
The only difference is when Ryan says, you know, you have a Chinese girlfriend, and then I start doing jokes about, you know, how I'm bad in relationships. Sometimes I guess the line does get a bit blurred because the show feels really personal, and then people think this is like a, you know. And I've also been on the Late Late talking about personal stuff in the past. So that's just the nature of Irish telly, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess it's kind of in a way, it's a necessary evil, because even if you had a comedian running a chat show, Ireland is just so small. Like, people make so much criticism of Irish TV. I mean, it's completely hot air anyway. The criticisms are relevant because the truth is, Ireland is tiny. Like, how are you going to find 2 to 3 guests a week that are going to be able to go up and be funny and be interesting and have really interesting things to talk about? It just doesn't exist. You know, like even New York City, right? New York City is 8.5 million people. The greater New York area is 16 million people, right? New York City does not have a chat show that thinks, and New York is like one of the most creative cities in the world. It doesn't have a chat show that thinks it can it can have guests every week that will be able to do that. Like, it's kind of impossible to do. So I guess part of the problem in Ireland is you kind of have to go for that sort of multi-area, you know, TV experience where you're talking about serious things and funny things, and that is the way it is.
It's once a week, I suppose, but it's a 2-hour live show too. When you look at something like
the Late Late is, the Late Late's ridiculous. I mean, everybody knows that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Even Ryan Tubby knows that's ridiculous. There's no need for a 2.5-hour show. But I guess that becomes the thing in a way. Part of the viewing experience is like, how are they going to pull this off this week?
Well, it kind of happens every time. Well, I suppose the last 3 times they've replaced the Late Late host, it's guys like yourself, probably, and Dara O'Brien, where they're like, oh, why don't we get him to do it? Yeah. But then you get that where if somebody who's more ostensibly comic or a full-blown comedian, then how are they going to deal with the more serious issues? Are people going to be, you know, is it going to be, okay, where's the punchline? Is that going to be in the back of their heads?
Well, I think myself or Dara could handle that, actually, but I don't think a comedian should do the Late Late. Actually.
Not in its current guise.
But I do think a comedian should be doing something like the Saturday night show, you know, or if TV3, I do think there should be one comedian in Ireland. I mean, I know Brendan O'Connor did a little bit of comedy really early on, and he was fine. That's not a criticism of Brendan O'Connor, but I do think there should be somebody who has been telling jokes for a living and just understands like crowd dynamics and knows when to you know, like one thing about comedy that teaches you, like stand-up, is that, you know, sort of like you get a keen awareness of like when to be funny, you know, when to come in with a punchline, how to deal with a crowd. Like there's elements of interviewing that's very much like dealing with a heckler. So you got to know the right thing to say at the right time to keep the whole thing ticking over. You can see that at Kilconomics. Like the comedians, even though it's about the economy, a lot of the comedians have a keen sense of how to keep the thing moving along. So I just think, this is not to say we're the best, but I do think we have a skill set that really suits the format. Yeah. That's why the rest of the Western world, the rest of the English-speaking world, use comedians to do it, and we don't.
I think it's funny because I was listening to an interview with Lauren Michaels there, who's, you know, the creator and the creative force behind Saturday Night Live, still 40 years later, and he's saying he won't even hire a writer unless they've got some stand-up experience. So even then, he's obviously thinking of timing, and he's obviously thinking of how a joke is molded, I suppose. Yeah,
and a confidence, you know, and I mean, well, I think the other thing that stand-up does, if you're a successful stand-up comedian, whether you're a fan or not, if somebody becomes a successful stand-up comedian, they have something. I mean, of course they're funny, yeah, but you know, being a stand-up is more than just being funny. You know, there's a craft and there's a presence. I mean, I think the presence is a big thing too. You know, and those people that become successful have that or have something, whether it's the X factor. So it's actually a handy way of sort of cutting away. You know, like it actually narrows it down. Essentially, if a stand-up comedian is successful, they're already in the final, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you are picking from a good crop. I mean, I'm not a talent person. I'm not like a TV producer, but I do think you're picking from a good crop. And I mean, I think in Ireland, Irish comedians, like we just said, it's a tiny country, right? But Irish comedians have punched well above their weight, like even internationally, you know? So, like, I don't know what the fear is, you know? I don't know where this great fear comes from, you know? And it's certainly not, like people say it's fear of offense, but like Mrs. Brown's Boys, like whatever, I'm not going to make a comment on what Mrs. Brown's Boys is, but it's pretty filthy.
Yeah.
And people are not getting offended, you know? People are not. Yesterday I was actually doing some DVD promotion. I was in a tuk-tuk, you know, doing like proper PR pics on near Grafton Street. And this old couple stopped to take a picture and they said, "Oh, we loved you on the Late Late," they said. And I was like, "Oh, sorry about the filth." And they said, "No, we love the filth." These two old ones, like a man and woman. "Oh, we love the filth." And they're like definitely like 70s, maybe even 80s. You know? And it's like, so I don't really know. You know, I think with everything, you know, you can see it with Dennis O'Brien and all this stuff. Like,
The Waterford Whispers news stuff.
Yeah, I think that there's a greater fear in Ireland to people saying the wrong thing than there might be in other markets.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, you could look at, New York and the kind of the rise of the big guys in the 70s and the Richard Pryors and everything. Is that where you think Ireland is? You need somebody to kind of push the boundaries a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, people have been pushing the boundaries. Tommy's been pushing Tommy Tiernan's been pushing the boundaries since he started. The Bandits, the Rubber Bandits pushed the boundaries. Like, I mean, I have, like all my series, none of them have been like, happy-go-lucky comedy. Like, people do push the boundaries here. It's not so much, it's not so much about that. It's just this, I think maybe this, I don't know, there's just a fear in Ireland about offence. From the television point of view. Like, I just saw The Queen of Ireland yesterday, and it was just so interesting to think, like, you can really sue your way into, like, victory, And Iona did it with Panty, and Dennis O'Brien has done it to the point where if you're litigious enough, people will avoid you. And that's unfortunate that our legal system supports that, So if you have enough money to sue, you can protect yourself.
So do you think the understanding of satire is there? Do you think people fully grasp, everybody fully grasps what the guys at like somewhere like Waterford Whispers News are doing, that The Onion have done for years, or publications like The Onion have done for years?
Well, that Waterford Whispers News thing drove me nuts, because first of all, I love Waterford Whispers News.
Those guys are great. Yeah.
They're great, and whatever, it's The Onion for Ireland, but The Onion doesn't deal with Ireland, so I'm happy to have it, And I think they sometimes are like The Onion, but I do think they have their own energy too.
And I mean, on a broader sense and kind of on the world scale, I suppose, as well, there's a lot of times you're seeing it more and more lately, which is a little bit disappointing, where a comedian will say something, obviously, doing his act or whatever. You saw it recently, I suppose, with Louis C.K. doing SNL. There was a big uproar over his opening monologue, which was brilliant.
But it comes and goes, though.
Yeah.
A lot of that just comes and goes, and that's fine, because that is a product of the world that you're inhabiting, which is fine, because it's the pros and cons of online media discussion, is that it just needs content, it's just like a battle for content. So it's just become very easy to take what a well-known person says and turn it into a scandal. So I think what happens is they're trying to create scandals all the time.
Yeah.
But most of it, I think the majority of it comes and goes. Some people are unfortunate, but the Louis C.K. one wasn't a scandal, and it came and went.
Yeah. People were kind of smart enough to go, no, this is a comedian being funny.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But I do think that Louis C.K. is a very loved comedian. It's funny how different comedians like inhabit different spaces. And Louis C.K. is a very loved comedian, whereas Russell Brand is one that people love to hate. Even though he's also very successful, but people, I would imagine maybe it mightn't come and go as fast with somebody like Russell.
Why do you think that is?
Well, who knows? That's just personalities.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like if the life of well-known people is a reality TV show, which it kind of plays out like in a way, like you throw a couple of strangers into a reality TV show house, and some become villains, some become, and like people just like then.
It's just personality traits.
Yeah, it's just personalities and the way that people react to people, and some people are villains for a while, then they're here, like who knows? But like that's happening all the time, So Louis C.K. is like the comedian of the people. People love him. I love him. He's also like a super nice guy. He's been to Ireland a lot. He's played the International, and so that one just came and went. Other ones don't come and go. Like the one that happened to Tommy years ago, Tommy Tiernan, about a sort of a joke which he was given as an example of the type of joke that might be problematic or might be funny, even though it's about non-funny issues. So he got in massive, and that did really affect his career, which is really, that is unfortunate. So sometimes you can be unlucky, but that also depends if people really want to run with it.
Yeah.
People didn't find that they wanted to run with the Louis C.K. thing.
Yeah.
So much so that I can't even remember exactly what he said that got.
Oh yeah, it was a bit. He was talking about mild racism. Then he doubled down on a bit, and I mean, I thought it was hilarious. I get it. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was in, and I know you did the Comedy Cellar a bit in the summer as well, and then in New York.
Yeah,
we were in New York.
Yeah, he's there all the time.
And I saw Michael Che there a couple of months ago.
I'm gigging with him all summer, and I hate following him.
But he's great.
So tough to follow, man.
But he's great, and I think even he was kind of gone because he's known for doing Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live. He's such a famous guy. So you can even see him going, oh shit, maybe he isn't, maybe that's part of his act. But for the 20 minutes that I saw, I was like, can I get away with this?
Yeah.
Am I pushing it a little bit? Is there going to be somebody in the crowd with a cell phone who's going to
film
this?
I mean, he was, during the summer, he was particularly feeling that because he was actually kind of winging it all summer. Like, I think he was trying to try out new bits, and he was trying to improvise as much as possible. So that is when you get in the most trouble. Like, a lot of times when I've gotten in trouble in Ireland over the years is when I'm winging it. And Because at the end of the day, when you're with your mates, and this is not a defense, I don't even like the debate about what you can and can't say. Because like human beings are just not perfect. Like we don't have a built-in censor. Like sometimes people say stupid things. I don't think it should have as much, have as many consequences as it does sometimes. But when you're with your mates and you're messing around, you often say things that are like completely inappropriate. And sometimes it's kind of funny. Like it depends on the mood you're in. You know, that's just like human beings. So sometimes when you're in the flow, like in your improving, you just like say things and the energy is up and the confidence is up and you'll say things. And, you know, to be honest, a lot of time crowds like it.
Yeah.
You know, they really do. And so do I, is the truth, you know? Like I remember seeing Dave Chappelle years ago in the Comedy Cellar and he was winging it. And he said, I love fat women, but not for the reason that you think. I like fat women because you can how clean does this have to be?
No, you can go for it. Go for it.
Oh, yeah. He said, I like fat women because you can make a pussy on any part of their body. Last week I fucked this chick in the back of the neck. And you knew he was just he's kidding around. And like, it's entirely inappropriate. And it's fattest and it's probably sexist and it's all those things. But he clearly isn't that person. And, you know, that's when you get into that debate about what you can and can't say. But I have to be honest, whether I was right or wrong, I found that funny at the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Context is everything.
Yeah, but I did find it funny at the time. And, you know, is that because I'm a bad person? Like, everybody has good and bad about them. But the problem is that everybody in society is looking for absolutes.
Yeah.
You know? And I think because there's so many outlets for your voice nowadays, and there's something to be gained by being part of the conversation that is what can you and can you not say, and people are getting offended on behalf of everybody else. You know, I think it's become a bigger conversation than it needs to be, actually.
And I think it comes maybe when you get to a certain point, or you get to a certain level of fame. Because I saw Doug Stanhope there in Vicar Street last week, and Doug Stanhope's got some crazy bits, brilliant, but they're crazy and they really push the boundaries. Nobody's really going to bother Doug Stanhope, and he's got a bit on that because...
Well, they did before. You know, he got in trouble in Ireland before.
Yeah, he made a comment. I interviewed him a couple of years ago, and it was funny, though. You know, it was funny. It was a...
I don't know why. Women are so ugly, I don't know why anyone would want to rape you anyway.
Yeah. But given the context, it was in I think I was in Kilkenny.
Yeah, it was in Kilkenny, and nobody knew who he was, and
it
wasn't full of Doug Stanhope fans, and they weren't in his frame of mind. You know?
If anybody who's a fan of his would know the context of, you know, everything he's coming out with, and his general vibe as well, which is very much to kind of push the boundaries.
Yeah.
What in terms of social media though as well, are you acutely aware of that stuff? Are you acutely aware of burning material on social media? Because you were very early adapter to Twitter and everything else, and kind of interacting with the fans, because you do see comedians maybe a bit more cautious about social media, and then other comedians like Rob Delaney embrace it.
Yeah.
For the comedy aspect, you're there more for the interactions and to maybe hype the odd show and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, you know, well, I'm certainly not worried about burning material, because I tell stories on stage, so I can't tell stories on Twitter. So it's actually a way to be funny in a different way at times. Like lately, I haven't been you know, to be honest, like Twitter, I feel to a degree that, well, for me anyway, like Twitter works best when you're in a moment. So when you're out of Ireland and you're not really on like whatever's happening, it can be hard to like be responding to things. Like that's what I used to enjoy the most, like Henri's handball, or, you know, some big thing happening on TV, or the election, or like the gay marriage referendum. I happened to be around for that. So then you're in it. And then it's great because it's like immediate and you can be funny or whatever. You know, and if you're angry, you can be funny about being angry. So I'm certainly not worried about burning material in that way. You know, and it's great for promotion. It's great for engaging with people. But like everything, it's like, it's fun for a while and then you get sick of it, which is also fine, because you can tell somebody's like fresh to it. Like I'm trying to figure out Snapchat at the moment, but I don't get it. I can't help but think it's going to come and go really fast, because it just, the things that people seem to find like funny on Snapchat, I just don't get. Like I feel
I tried it for like 2 weeks and I couldn't.
Yeah. But I'm trying, you know, and you know, because like younger people are on it and it's interesting. You know, to be honest, it's also just good to know what it's like, because, well, there's probably some jokes in it, but it's also like you can just figure out sort of like where people's heads are at when they're like 21, 22. Because like I feel quite disconnected to that. Like even being back, because I was in China for 2 years, I actually missed out on a lot of pop culture for 2 years. I didn't even realize it happened until I got back, and there was all of a sudden like all these sort of like people in the zeitgeist that I'd never heard of, like Drake and The Weeknd, and particularly
you were that far removed from.
I was actually, yeah. I'd never heard of Drake. I'd never heard of The Weeknd, And like, I didn't know who Macklemore was. I'd heard the name, but I was like, who the fuck is Macklemore, you know? So that was weird because I was really, really committed to not engaging with English language stuff for that period of time. So that was interesting to go, wow, man, I am that guy now. I'm the guy that goes like, who is Macklemore, you know? And so that's not great when you're a comedian. So that's why it's good to be like back on social media. Like, because don't forget, like, I had to use a VPN to be on Twitter. And, you know, Instagram kind of exploded during my time in China, so I didn't really bother because I was using my VPN to get on Twitter and Facebook, but I just didn't feel like using VPN for one other thing because it was a pain in the hole. Like, being on Western social media in China was like a bit of a chore. Yeah. So, so the Instagram and Snapchat becoming really popular happened while I was in China, so I kind of I was a bit late to it all. But anyway, I'm pretty caught up now.
And like, speaking of China, and you've done it previously, like 10, 11 years ago with like Joy in the Hood and with the Work Experience show. It's very much you getting outside your comfort zone. Is that to feed your comedy? Because I know you're making shows around these instances a lot as well, but is that the feature comedy? Is that, okay, we're going to go there in mind of making a pilot, or I'm going to do a stand-up at the end of it, or you're literally just going for personal reasons and going, fuck it, let's just see what happens if I head over here?
No, I mean, China itself was like a whole collection of different reasons why I went to China. But why I do these like immersion type documentary type things is more, it sort of began by chance that I was asked to do the Work Experience. That wasn't my idea. And then turned out I was pretty good at it. I was good at adapting. I was good at sort of being in the moment, and I found it pretty easy to sort of write stand-up about it, and then that becomes like a format that you use, stand-up about your situation. So then it was just about, you know, finding ways to do that and finding interesting projects to do, you know, all of which were pretty successful, you know, like, and all of which were very enriching to me. So that's why I kind of kept doing it. China as a place to go was, you know, due to my own personal interest, a trip there with the guys from Abracadabra back in 2004, and also just the world becoming more and more interested in China, China rising, so to speak. And then suddenly, you know, you have this whole collection of reasons why it might be a good idea to do a TV show there. And that's how I ended up going in the end, you know? Yeah. So it wasn't like a personal thing, fuck it, let's see if we can make a TV show about it. It was more just like all those things coming together.
Because it's a language thing too, and you've done that before with Irish.
Yeah. I mean, that was another ingredient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that can't be easy. I mean, it can't get much harder, really, to try and do a whole act in a different language.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, but like, honestly, like, the challenge of that is not even the interesting thing about the project. It's the interesting thing to discuss maybe after the fact. Yeah. But actually, like, the journey of learning it and the ability to do it is just a way, it's just a key into like a deeper awareness of their society. And it's a way to understand it enough that you could then translate it into like a performance that will entertain and inform people back in the West, you know? So, because, you know, An Idiot Abroad went to China and they did a very funny show about China. But that's like, you know, that's a half an hour about China and it's really funny. And that's phase one, you know? But there's obviously a country of 1.4 billion people has more than just that initial fish out of water experience. So the great thing about learning the language and living there and living with family and immersing yourself is you get to each phase and you learn enough and you have enough experiences that you can keep it interesting for people that are watching, you know? But I mean, obviously the bonus for me is whatever about the fact that I get a TV show out of it, I also learn a lot. And I'm now fluent in Mandarin, which is like, I couldn't have imagined that happening. So that's why it's great that I have managed to find myself in these situations. But that's just the lucky byproduct of the way my career went. I mean, these weren't like career choices. There was just like some sort of evolution that happened, you know?
And I know you're going to start touring the new material all over Ireland.
At the end of November.
You're doing a whole lot of dates. And just to go back maybe to the Comedy Cellar there in the summer, were you in New York all summer, and was that the material that you were working on while you were over there?
Yeah, although I have to say, man, like I thought, you know, because I'm from New York originally, but I've lived in Ireland most of my life. I thought being back in New York would be more inspiring. Like I did think I would find a lot of nostalgic material from my childhood and, you know, a little bit, but most of it just added. I just was able to sort of make bits that I had already better for the States. So I would start doing bits that were working well, and then suddenly like little American things that wouldn't work here would be added to them. But I wasn't actually that as inspired as I thought I would be to write sort of like brand new bits which is a little frustrating as we get closer and closer to the beginning of my next tour.
So you had the tour set, and you had that, you knew you had to work towards that. Was that how?
Well, that's always that's us. That's being a comedian.
Okay.
You know, I mean, Louis C.K. You know, you mentioned him. He's in there all bloody summer, banging out material. Like, he needs material all the time. Everybody's in there. We're all banging out. We're all trying to get material. We're all trying to write material. We're trying to make it work. You know, so you know. But the other thing that was tough is, I mean, my successes, like in Ireland, and then also like my less dramatic success, but still quite like respected success, like in Edinburgh and Australia, gives me a pass right into gigging in New York, right? But the audience doesn't know me, and you still have, you know, the bookers, you know, you still have to impress them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was there all summer saying, I'm going to try out all my new bits. Like, I had to do the bits that worked to make sure that all these places, you know, like, had me locked in as somebody to gig, because I wanted to gig all summer. So it wasn't really like the ultimate stomping ground for new material. I mean, it was absolutely awesome.
Because you have the Irish audience there because of Louis. They all know the Comedy Cellar, so, you know, they all head there. They want to see a
Well, they
comic,
can't all head there because you can't get bloody tickets.
Yeah, it's tiny, yeah.
You can't get tickets. I do Irish shows. That's a separate thing. Like,
Yeah.
I do like that, and Rory Dolan's up in Yonkers, and like I did Boston. I did Caroline's, actually. I headlined Caroline's, which is like what all the American, like New York comedians want to headline Caroline's. It's a good payday, and it's like a proper gig. But actually, the room with that was full of Irish, because then it was like my gig, and you know, there's plenty of room for them. So that was full of Irish.
So it's your fans kind of coming
Yeah,
out
which
as
is
well.
that's
Yeah.
also that's great. That's great fun, but that's like a separate thing, you know. Well, actually, that Caroline's gig, so you had like 60% Irish, 40% American. So that Caroline gigs was some sort of like, you know, keeping the Irish happy, keeping the Americans happy. But there was actually quite a bit of humor. Sort of in the situation, humor about sort of a joke for the Irish and explaining to the Americans why that worked, which is actually kind of funny back to the Irish. And, you know, so like that was a great dynamic. Those gigs were great fun. But yeah, in terms of the Comedy Cellar, they're pretty easy. Like, the audiences are totally up for it. And the biggest problem was the China stuff was working so well all summer in America, and I had so much of it that I just wanted to do it there. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not that old, that material, you know? So I was really happy to do it there, but that's not what I needed for coming back to Ireland and doing a new show. But that's fine. Like, I've been in this situation at least 8 times in the last 18 years. So like, that's where you want to be, you know? Like, comedians tend to work better when they know that they need a new show. And always my tours evolve. You know, like the last time I did a show like this, which was just like about whatever, I called it Des Bishop Likes to Bang. It was supposed to be about learning the drums, and, you know, I wanted it to be a bit musical, but, you know, over time it evolved into something else. And then I started doing that booze series. Like, we started filming that, and I was writing loads of material about Ireland's relationship with alcohol. And by the end of that tour, it was like, there was like 30 minutes of material about Ireland's relationship with booze. So like, this tour will be the same. Like, you know, it'll start as one thing and it'll evolve into another, and, you know, there'll be loads of improvising. So that's fine. I mean, it doesn't have to be, people want to laugh. They don't really care. I mean, it's fine when you do like Made in China, right? Like, people would be pretty disappointed if you then just started talking about, you know, the common agricultural policy. You know, like, they'd be pretty
TED Talk instead.
Yeah. You know, they want you to talk about like the topic when it's clearly like a topic show. But for a stand-up show like Gray Matters, it's going to be, I don't think they care. They just want to laugh. You know?
And so you're heading back to New York now soon. Are you going back to New York in the next while before you go on tour, before you start the big tour?
Yeah, but that's just because, you know, I have to move my mother out of her house. She sold her house and she's renting it back, and now she's in the bloody hospital again. So I have to, it's just a good time to just clear out the house of our childhood and put her into an apartment which just suits her needs better.
Yeah.
You know, so that is literally just going back for that. I was actually supposed to do something else, but I had to change it because she fell and broke her hip. So, but that's just a whole other aspect of my life, which is actually the all-consuming aspect of my life.
All the grown-up shit.
Well, unfortunately, when my dad was sick, I turned it into a bloody show, but my mother's not getting a show because it's just tragic, the whole thing, you know? So, well, here's one funny thing that happened. This will tell you what it's like looking after my mother, right? So, for 2 weeks leading up to her fall, she, you know, my mother's like a stubborn mule, man. Like, she's a pain in the hole, if I could just go on record as saying that. And, you know, she was getting better, but like not amazing. You know, she's super unstable on her feet. She gets dizzy a lot. She's on 24-hour oxygen. And I was working really hard to give her like a quality of life while at the same time just like keeping her pace of recovery within her limits, right? So every day she just had this one good day, and it was the worst thing that happened, because then she was like, I'm gonna be like independent again. And she kept pushing it, and she kept telling me like she was fine, and I was like, ended up like shouting, and I said, yeah, Ma, I know you're fine, but like I need to film you to see what you're like, because you're not stable, you're gonna fall. And then the nurse told me, like, we had an aide, and the aide was like, I've had to catch her at least 4 times. I was like, Ma, the aide said she's had to catch you 4 times. Not only once, don't listen to her. And then of course she's battling with her. And like anyone who's looking after my mother becomes public enemy number 1, because my mother knows best. And I was becoming public enemy number 1. And I said to her 4 days before she fell, I was like, Ma, I don't want to say I told you so, because I am not here to tell you, like, I'm not here to fight with you, actually. I'm here to try to help you, but you're fighting me every step of the way. I don't want to say soon, I told you so, but I promise you, if you continue to carry on like you're carrying on, it will be an I told you so situation, right? And, the day I left I went to Boston and Maine. So I was gone for 2 days. I was leaving the house, and she was like, wouldn't look at me. She was in a mood, like, who does this kid? I raised him. Who does he think he is to tell me how I can, when I can and can't walk, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I went to Boston. The aide went upstairs to like go for a shit or something. And my mother decided she needed a cookie, like at her pace, and then she gets up, and she has this terrible habit of like needing to clean shit while she's up. I mean, she cannot stand without the walker, but she needs to do a million things. And on her way to get a cookie, she fell and she broke her hip, right? Now, like, I did not want to be, I told you so. Like the way I'm telling this story now, it feels like I'm going like, I fucking told you so. But like, I did not want to be in that situation. My brother called me that night, like 8 or 9 hours after it happened. And then the whole next day I waited, because I thought she always calls me. She never called me. So I called her that night, like a day and a half after it happened. I was heading back the next morning, and I said, Ma, how you doing? She's like, oh, not so good. I said, oh, why? Why, what's the matter? Oh, I think you know that I fell. I was like, yeah, I know you fell. I was surprised you didn't call me. Why didn't you call me? And she said, well, I just didn't want to call you. I said, why? And she said, because you were right. So I was like that's what I'm doing. It's like,
that hurt
like
more than the fall.
Yeah. I don't care. I never wanted to be right. I didn't want you to fucking fall. That was the whole point of the whole exercise. I didn't want you to fall, but that's the way it is in my mother's head. Like she wanted to win the battle of of proving that she was better than she was, and like I just didn't care about that battle. I just wanted her to slowly recover. But and I'm sure there's plenty of people listening right now that are going, oh my God, I went through that
resonating, yeah.
Exact same thing. And I mean, you can't make general comments about the difference between the sexes, so I can only talk about the difference between my father and my mother. Like my dad, when he was sick, he just like embraced the fact that he was being looked after. And my mother is just fighting the fact that she's dependent every step of the way. But in fairness to my mother, she looked after everything all our lives, My father was definitely a sort of passive member of the family, My mother looked after everything. And it's really tough for her to not be able to look after.
It's a bigger readjustment for her.
It is, man. It's tough for her. She can't look after anything. And, that is tough. Plus, the other thing, in fairness to my mother, was when we were looking after my dad, my mother was there, and she was like a full member of the team.
Supervising, yeah.
Yeah, but she was a full member. She was just on it as she was totally capable of looking after my dad, even though that was only 4 or 5 years ago, right? Whereas now we're a man down, so that does also make it tougher, because we don't have my mother to help, because we're helping my mother, and the other thing that happens with that is because my mother was so on it with my dad, the extended family didn't get involved, whereas the extended family are getting involved this time, and anyone who's been in my situation knows that brings its own complications.
A whole new set of dynamics.
A whole new set of dynamics and control issues and power struggles, and that's interesting too. I mean, that is life. I mean, I'll tell you one thing, for somebody who left home at 14 and lived in another country for most of their life away from their family, I am definitely getting a crash course in family dynamics, And I can tell you one thing, at this stage now, with the stress that I've dealt with for the last year, I just thank fuck I was sent to another country, because I am glad I haven't been dealing with this shit since I'm 14, because I don't know what I would have ended up like if I had been around it my whole life. But it's stressful, but I think, well, it's part of life. I mean, I feel like I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I'm not comfortable. I mean, I'm a control freak like my mother, like I really am. Like I know that, it's like, why would I care that somebody else is like taking control of one situation? Like, why would that bother me? But sometimes it does. That's a weird, like, human thing. Like, it's part of my personality. So, like, I am a control freak, just like my mother. So, I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable not being a part of it anyway. So I'm not like resentful at the fact that my mother's situation has changed my life, you know, because, you know, you got to be where you got to be, you know. So I'm happy to be in it.
You don't know if you probably won't be going back to New York full time. Then you're still going to be you're still.
Well, I really am supposed to be back in New York full time, but
because it's a long tour you have, like it's a lot of
well,
dates.
I'm going to be bouncing back and forth. Now I have to be honest. When I booked the amount of gigs, there's quite a lot of gigs down there. When I booked the amount of gigs, my mother was doing a lot better. Like, you know, when I booked this tour in, my mother had the house was sale agreed. We were getting my mother an apartment. She didn't need 24-hour care, and she was getting better all the time. By the time this tour is starting, like, my mother's back in the hospital. You know, I had to get an emergency power of attorney to close on her house because she literally couldn't go to the closing. We have no idea if she's going to recover. You know, like it's a lot less stable situation. But at the same time, it's only a 6-hour flight. I'm only back here for like 3.5 weeks at the end of November. Then I'll be there all the way to mid-January. So who knows what situation we'll be in by mid-January. So I just like, my life is a little up in the air, but it's not like so insane that I'm going like, I think I'm going to have to cancel the tour, you know? And look, like, I'm not going to cancel the tour, but like worst case scenario, like if things just get so unmanageable that I have to like rearrange some dates, then I'll just do it. You know, that's just life. You know, I don't want to let people down. I don't want to let, you know, people that are really looking forward to the show down. But like everybody, like life happens to everybody. The weird thing about like being a comedian, being an entertainer, and like being self-employed in that way is that like you never want to call in sick. You know, like I very rarely called in sick my entire career.
There's a certain ethic that comes with it, like a comedian, work ethic that comes with it, with being a comedian, because you do have to be on the road so much, and it is like you say, you're self-employed. You know, you can't.
Yeah,
take
well, it's
holiday
different
days.
to calling your boss and going, boss, I can't
You
come
just
in
don't get
today.
paid for-
Essentially, you're calling like 500 people and going, I'm sorry, guys, I can't come in today. Not only can I not come in today, but I got to organize a refund. And like, I never want to do that. I mean, I always want to do the shows anyway. But if need, like, that's what I mean. But this is more in a response to sort of like, some people will go like, what, this is chaos, man. How can you do it? But like, it's really not chaos, because at the end of the day, there's a solution to every situation, you know, and it will be fine. And people are pretty understanding, you know, but right now, I think it's okay, you know, and there's like, you know, there's 3 of us. Like my brother lives in New York. My other brother lives in Ireland, but if he needs to, he'll go back and I'll go back. And if needs be, I'll just, you know, my gigs tend to be Thursday to Sunday, you know, if needs be, I'll go back on Monday and I'll come back on, you know, I'll come back on Wednesday. And, you know, you never know. Like it really is a situation with my mother where she could actually start to recover and accept her situation a bit better, and we could end up in some sort of like more like a new reality that's like stable, or it could go the other way. Like she could just, you know, diminish and not recover from this operation. But that, like, listen, man, like I wouldn't be talking about it as casually, except that we're all going to go through something like this. Like if comedians can talk about like the fun of having kids, and you know McIntyre can do his bit about like the difference between single people and somebody who doesn't have a kid and somebody who does have a kid, you know, like all those things are like funny about life. Like, well, definitely comedians can talk about it, funny or not, about like losing a parent and looking after a parent, but I also think there's probably going to be humor in it too. And if I find it, I'll say it, because I think it's important that we, you know, I don't think we should pretend that those things don't happen.
Yeah.
You know, because like they're just as much a part of our lives, and just as much, or going to be anyway. So, but I mean, trust me, I'm not looking after my mother for material. but if it comes, I'll say it. But I'm also sort of rationalizing the fact that like I think it's okay to talk about this, because it's just like life.
If a comedian can't find a comedy in it, then who can, I suppose.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
What I just mean is like I think it's good to talk about it, because I actually think that like people get it, you know. And like if I heard somebody else talking about what if they were going through something similar, I'd take a lot from it, you know. I really would, and I do. There was somebody, God, who was it? Somebody was writing something about this situation. I can't remember. Very recently, the last couple of days. And I just remember going, fuck yeah, man. Yeah, I get that, you know? So that's nice. Like, it's nice when you can get that, you know, you can know that people, because I know that gazillions of people have gone through this before. So, you know, it's nice to know that other people are going through it.
What we'll do is we'll put all the dates in a piece on the side as well, so people can see exactly where you're playing. And,
now you can buy tickets out of sympathy for the stress. now you can buy tickets. Just go, wow, this guy deserves us to be there.
He's going to have some deeper, darker shit the next time we see him, maybe. But all genuine, thanks so much for coming in, Des, and all the best to your mum. I hope she gets better.
Oh, thanks.
And continued success. I'm looking forward to seeing the new material when it drops.
Thanks, man. Thanks a lot.
Man.
Thanks for having me.